History of Aviation podcast with Derrick, Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the History of Aviation podcast. I'm Derrick Beeler, and as always, I'm joined by Mr. David Rowe and Dave Gorman. In this episode 39, we'll be discussing the Cessna 310.
The Cessna 310 is an American 4 to 6 seat, low wing, twin engine monoplane produced by Cessna between 1954 and 1980. It was the first twin engine aircraft that Cessna put into production following its very first twin, the Cessna T-50, that was manufactured for World War II.
This is another legend here, right, guys?
Yeah, it's definitely carved out a place in general aviation for itself as a great aircraft. There's a lot of them. Funny thing today, I drove by the airport. I was chasing a couple of Hercules, hoping that they would show up at the airport. Of course, they didn't show up, but I get to the airport, and what do I see parked on the ramp?
A 310.
A Cessna 310. Of all, had never noticed one there before, but today there was one parked there. And I took a bunch of pictures of it.
There you go.
It was a really pretty white and green, and just out of the blue, here we are getting ready to talk about it. And there's one at my airport. So, they're around, they're available, and they're a pretty airplane.
Well, let's think about what we should talk about next then. So what do you really want to see? Because apparently there's some magic on this podcast. So that's pretty cool. And, this is a plane. I am not a huge general aviation guy, so whenever we take a dive on one of these, there's a lot that I'm learning and thinking about oftentimes for the first time. But this is a common plane. It's a recognizable plane. And to be honest, I was more familiar with you can't see my picture, those of you guys who are listening, but I've got a picture of the Air Force version, the U-3, the blue canoe. That's what that's how I know this plane. I've seen it, dressed up in Air Force colors. So like you, David, I guess, you start getting focused on it, and then suddenly you realize that there are a lot of them and they're common, and heck of an airplane. It's pretty cool that it had the production run that it had. You got to believe that twin engine power, especially coming right out of World War II, a lot of these planes were marketed towards people who learned to fly in the military and were looking for, a cheap, economical, safe way to fly their family. And this plane really fit the bill for a long time, didn't it?
Absolutely. The Cessna was really forward thinking when they brought this one to market, because they saw that, all those pilots, multi-engine rated pilots coming back, and, they're going to go into business, and they need a plane to get from, business place to business place. And this was exactly it. It's faster than a single engine. It can hold up to 6 people. So you got good, cargo capacity, and had some good range in it. And sure enough, they hit the market right on the nose. And, 28 years they built this aircraft. So it had a good long life. There's 5,449 of them built. So there's quite a few of them out there in the GA.
I'd say that was a pretty successful design if you're making over 5,000 of them. Goodness
exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And, like you said, it was the first twin that they produced that was not didn't have a military application. Eventually, this was modified and used by the military, but groundbreaking kind of stuff here. Some of the designs of this, like you said, with the twin engines, that certainly attracted the market. And you mentioned about the business use. This plane was used. A lot of business people operate this aircraft still today. But it also was used for like air taxi service too, right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I even found a reference to it being used as a forest fire detection aircraft. So the Forest Service must have used it.
Yeah, I saw a picture of one that had an infrared detection system underneath the nose, I guess.
Exactly.
So
again,
know, right?
Right. Well, it's a hallmark of a successful airplane. It's got capabilities. It's adaptable to other uses, and people will find another use for this. And this one definitely fit the bill.
Well, you mentioned about the adaptabilities. I mean, it wasn't doing, it didn't serve as a fighter or a bomber, as far as I know. But
No.
there were constant upgrades to engines and the size of the cabin, the length of the nose, the shape of the tail. This was a plane that was tinkered with and appeared to get better. It was faster, could fly higher. Different models that were developed over the length of its production. But I think it looks fast sitting on the ground, especially with that swept back tail and everything on it. It's a pretty sleek looking aircraft. The nacelles, behind the props, very aerodynamic and sleek looking. The tanks, I think, what do they call these things? The tuna tanks that some of them carried on the wingtips. It just looks like it was a well thought out design.
Yeah, it's really interesting about those tip tanks. They've got two names. Tuna tanks are the early version, and Stabila tanks is the later version, where they kind of canted them upwards and gave them a little bit of dihedral to add to the wings for supposed stability. But the interesting thing about it is the tip tanks are the main tanks on this aircraft. Whereas most airplanes have fuel tanks in the wings, the 310s, the main tanks are in the tip tanks. That's totally unusual.
So you would run out of the tip tanks first, and then your, not necessarily reserve, but your secondary would be in the wings, right?
Well, and when it first started out, it only had the tip tanks. The A and B models, right. They actually only had the tip tanks. And then, as again we were talking about it, this thing went through Model A through Model S and multiple variants, other named variants. So it had a lot of modifications. So it started out with 2 tanks, and you ended up with, I think, 6 tanks, 4 auxiliary and 2 main tanks. And one of the things I was reading for owners is you really have to understand how to move fuel from tank to tank, because it has a very particular system that you have to be aware of, where it overflows into this tank and you can't flow it to another tank. So it's one of those things that if you're an owner of this plane, you really got to understand the fuel situation, because it's not typical to your other general aviation aircraft.
Well, I saw an anecdote about one of these that was lost, and I'm sure there was many more than just one that was lost because of that fuel management that you described, started with the tip tanks and going into the wings. And if you start the other way, or if you ask a lineman to fill her up, and the lineman doesn't understand where you start, that could cause a lot of problems. So
I read the exact same thing, where they assume it's in the wings and they fill those tanks up, and those are smaller tanks. Yep. And so you assume that you've got full tanks on, the outside. I think it's 50 gallons on those tip tanks, and the auxiliary tanks are only maybe 30 gallons. So 20 gallons difference, and you're expecting to go several hundred miles, and you suddenly aren't going to make it.
Yeah.
It did have some decent range, but I read one of the anecdotes I read was talking about, there was a time where I think the Air Force evaluated this aircraft and said that it could be flown for about $12 an hour. Did you see that?
I did see that.
Yeah. It's like, that's an amazing statistic. You think that, hey, it's a twin. It's got 2 engines. You got, more issues with that kind of stuff. Higher fuel consumption, higher speed. $12 an hour. What a bargain.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Now that's some old numbers. Okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That's fuel numbers
might be up to 14 or 15 now, right?
About $20 now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But, no, and that's the great thing about it, is it was capable. You could put a bunch of people in it, or the other thing is you could pull seats out of the back of the cabin and, load cargo into the back. So, if you've just got 1 or 2 people in the front, and all the back of it, you could fill up with cargo. So, it's capable of, multiple things.
As we've gone through some of our civil aviation profiles here, I'm learning more about telling the different bonanzas apart, from windows, number of windows and shapes of things and the tail and all this kind of stuff. This is an aircraft I realized that I have often confused with the Beechcraft Baron.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I saw something that was a little bit funny. They said that it was a competitor, or it was like a replacement of the Cessna's answer to that's what it was. Cessna's answer to the Beechcraft Baron. I'm like, well, wait a minute. This was produced 8 years before the Baron. So I think maybe the Baron was an answer to this plane.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. I think they've kind of got it backwards. This was Cessna's competition was the Beech Baron, the Piper Apache, and the Aztec, the Commander 500, and the Aerostar. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there were several other twins that were built, but I think Cessna was kind of the first into the market and kind of cornered it to a certain extent. You know, you've got the Cessna name behind it. And one of the things I read was if you were a Cessna pilot and you were moving up through the different aircraft of the day, this was very easy to move into because you were familiar with the way it worked. It looked and felt like a Cessna. So if you were in a 130 or a 180 and you moved up into this, it was a Cessna. You knew what to expect. Obviously with twin engines and, it's heavier, faster, you've got to make some concessions to that. But if you know how to fly the lower Cessnas single engine, this was an easy step up.
Yeah, it wasn't overpowered. It wasn't a racer, but it certainly had enough power to get, to elevation, get you where you needed to go in a hurry. It seems like there's, very, very good visibility in this plane too.
Absolutely. The big windows in the front. As a matter of fact, that was one of the features they changed as they moved down the line, is they added an extra set of windows in the back. They added a sunroof window on the back of the cabin in the back. So yes, it had very good visibility. As a matter of fact, I think they even made it a single pane window in the front as opposed to a double pane. Oh. So yeah, very good visibility.
Well, you mentioned over 5,000 of these were built. There were a couple of the 310 and the 320. There were an additional almost 600 of those that were built. What's the difference between the 310 and the 320?
I think it's mostly just power. That seemed to be from all the things I was reading, it was just every time they would advance it to another model, it was just a bigger, better engine, a little faster. Small changes like the windows. They beefed up the landing gear. I think I read the 320 had the turbocharged engines too. Yes. Yeah. That was the biggest advancement, I think, is they went from a normally aspirated engine into the turbo engines. And that increased the speed, that increased the carrying capacity. And so that was the major difference, is that turbo versus the normally aspirated engines.
Yeah, that example did quite well too. Like I said, over 500 of those were built. So
now here's an interesting fact that I read is it's interesting to note that through the life of the 310, engine power only increased by 45 horsepower on each side. So we're not talking huge amounts of power gain. It's just, it was incremental, and, you put 90 more horses in it, and, that makes a big difference.
It sure does. Well, it was very streamlined, and I know later models where they extended the nose, that increased some cargo carrying capabilities, but they said it also helped improve the balance of the aircraft too, kind of spreading out the load a little bit over the length of the fuselage.
Absolutely. That was a big thing about it. Another thing they also did is where the engine nacelles on the wing, they lengthened those in the rear and gave you a compartment at the back that you could put cargo into, small items into the back of the engine nacelle area. And that's kind of on the center line of the airplane. So that doesn't really, hurt your weight and balance as much as it does in the front or the back. So that was another feature that was added.
Very creative. There was something I saw about redirecting engine exhaust with the wings. I think they had it going across the top of the wings, and it was loud or something. And so, do you remember what that was, Dave?
Yes, I sure do. It was called the Overwing Augmenter Tube Exhaust System. So this was back in the early 50s models up into the early 60s. So the engine exhaust was flow out over the wing instead of a normal just out the sides through these augmenter tubes is what they called them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was noisy because it's out in the open and next to the cockpit or to the cabin. So you could hear it. But what they discovered is that those augmenter tubes were the gases from the engine were causing corrosion in the back of the wing and the back of the spar. And so it became an issue that you had to, check that for damage. And it was intended, the reason I put it in the plane in the first place was for cooling, to keep the engine cool. Because again, we talked about those really thin engine nacelles. If you look at it, it's a really tight cowling. And so to help cool it, this was the idea to help cool it. But ultimately, I think it was causing more damage in the back of the wing than it was saving in the front. And so they got rid of it and just went back to a normal, ejecting it out the bottom of the wing where it, goes out into the airflow normally.
Gotcha. And I know some of these were developed or available with 3-bladed prop too, right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I even read somewhere where there's somebody that had a 4-bladed prop on it. I think it was a Hartzell propeller. So as the turbos came on and the power increased, they were trying all kinds of 2, 3. And like I said, I think I read somewhere where there was even a 4-bladed prop available for one of the versions. So yes, there was several different combinations of engines and propellers available.
This is a plane that there's an example I've seen up at Oshkosh several times. A famous one, actually, a TV show star, from the Sky King.
Yeah.
There's one that Songbird 3 is what it is. Yeah, from 1967 when that plane was built. There's actually 3 versions of that plane. They had what was it? A 310B, a 310D, and then I'm not sure what Songbird 3 is. I don't think I wrote that down. I'm showing it as a D. I think that was
okay. Is a D?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, they had multiple Songbirds or multiple 310s that they used in that show. It actually started with a Cessna Bobcat. That was the original plane that the Sky King flew. Yeah. And this show was supported by Cessna because the pilot that did a lot of the flying was a Cessna pilot. He was a company man, and they had to have him fly the airplane because whoever the TV company hired wasn't qualified to do some of the flying and landing that was required. Right. They needed somebody that was, a more capable pilot. So Cessna provided cockpits for them to shoot interiors and the actual planes that they flew in the show. So Cessna was a big supporter of the Sky King. It was actually a radio show and a TV show, but the TV show was the one that used the airplanes.
Well, I know that the guy usually parks Songbird 3 up fairly close to the roadway, that's going through the area where aircraft are parked, close to where you're sitting and everything. But people are all day stopping, getting pictures, posing for pictures. It's a really popular plane. So it brings back, at a place like Oshkosh, the things that brought them in, this aircraft, that TV show certainly attracted a lot of fans. For me, it was the Corsair. You too, I think, Dave, from Baba Black Sheep.
Yeah, that's the reason.
I get misty about those planes, but I know for a lot of folks, the Songbird stops them. Yep.
It's a generational thing. When you see that airplane for the first time, it leaves a mark on you, and that's. For the 50s and 60s folks, it was the Songbird, and for the later 70s generation, which is where we are, it's Baba Black Sheep Corsairs.
That's the one. Well, sure is cool to see. A bunch of these built, a lot of different designations. You said all the way up to the 310S.
Yeah, 310S was the last designation of the for the 310. But again, there were several other versions out there. There was what was it? We talked about the military. It started out as an L-27. They later changed it to the U-3. There was a coal mill executive 600 version. There was a engineer named Jack Riley, and he made a bunch of versions: the Riley 65, Super 310, Turbo Stream, the Rocket, the Turbo Rocket. These were all, uprated engines, turbocharged intercoolers, 3-blade Hartzell propellers in a counter-rotating configuration to further increase performance and single engine safety. So, I mean, many versions, lots of different changes. It's a good airplane.
Yeah, the Riley Turbo Rocket. That sounds pretty cool.
I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds fast. So, yeah. So I was a little surprised. I think I kind of just expected that this was a pilot co-pilot type of situation, and it definitely is not. I think it also just features controls on one side of the aircraft, right?
I think it probably started that way, but the ones that I was looking at, the later models, they are dual control.
Oh, they are dual control. Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I watched a video of this guy promoting a 310 that was for sale that had been refurbished, and the cockpit was immaculate. I mean, just Garmin, video screens, all new gauges,
state of the art,
dual controls, repainted. The seating, I mean, brand new seat covers. It was beautiful.
You made him an offer, didn't you?
Money in the house.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure I've got a couple of $100,000 sitting around for an airplane. I might have to. My wife might not agree to that one.
Yeah, but if the first plane you get's a twin, that's living large, though, right?
Very much so.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Could you land it at the racetrack, Dave? Is it? I saw that this plane has some, with that power, it's got some short takeoff capabilities in certain conditions.
It does have that. A little sidebar, interesting story. There's actually a photo that is in the photo library at the Speedway that I have actually seen of someone landing an airplane on the drag strip. I think this was in the 60s.
Was it on purpose, or was he declaring an emergency? Oh
no, this was on purpose. I'll have to pull the picture out and share it with you. But it somebody, I can't remember the guy's name. It was somebody semi-famous in aviation, somebody that you probably know. Anyhow, there's actual pictures of people landing airplanes on the drag strip at Bristol Dragway. So yes, that is true.
That's got to be a steep descent.
If you've ever seen the drag strip, it's literally goes into a V-shaped mountain. So yes, you'd have to come in over the ridge, drop in, and then just hit the brakes hard.
That's that's
okay. That's
Honduras style landing there.
That's somebody that really knows their capabilities of themselves and their aircraft. That's for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, it was an aerobatic airplane. It was somebody from an aerobatic background, and the name, I see the picture in my head, but I'm blanking on the name.
Well, maybe we can take a picture of that picture. We can put it on our social media.
Yeah, I'll definitely go pull that one out.
I bet people would be surprised to see it.
I'd like to see it myself, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you imagine me when I'm going through looking for, Dale Earnhardt and Rusty Wallace pictures, and I find this picture of a plane of, on the drag strip, and I'm like, where did this come from? What was this? I don't know the history or the story. It's just, there's actually a picture.
I like it, right. Guys. Go ahead, Dave.
So anyhow, back to the 310, but I read somewhere that there was a Stoll package that you could get to put on the wings. There was some wing vanes to help control airflow over the wings to improve stability and landing speeds and so forth. So I think there is some Stoll capability in this aircraft, but it was apparently a pretty expensive package because the guy didn't recommend actually buying it. He said it's available, but it's pretty expensive.
Well, it certainly seems like there's an awful lot of these that are still flying. It seems like there's a pretty good group of support and service available out there. There's upgrades. You could they stopped building it. What did we say in 1980?
1980.
1980.
So I mean, it's still a popular airplane. It doesn't seem like it's horribly expensive to get one. Even one of the later models can be had for less than $200,000, I think, is what I was seeing for some prices. And
that's exactly what I saw.
I don't have that kind of money, but there are pilots looking for that type of performance and room and history and all that kind of stuff. This certainly seems like a pretty good deal.
Absolutely. One of the guys that I was watching his video, he was flying it from, I think, like Charleston up to DC, out to Huntsville. He's an ex-Navy guy. And so he was doing consulting work. And so, he had a single engine plane. And even with the single engine plane, it was saving him time and money as opposed to going commercial.
Right.
So, and he wanted to get there just a little faster. So he's upgraded to the 310. And so, it's, much faster than the single engine and for not a lot more money, he said. And that's why he went that route and was very happy with it.
Well, my brother was telling a story about flying in an airplane from with his job. He was a musician and he had a new baby back home in New York, and he had played a show in New Jersey, and he had the opportunity to fly in a private plane back to New York after the show that they had played. And so he did, and it worked out well. The person who owned the plane was willing to help him get back to his fairly new child. And he said, the thing about an airplane is it's a time machine. He wasn't going commercial. He wasn't riding on the bus. It right. gave him time. And so in like 20 minutes, he was back in New York and not, just a short cab ride back home. And he said it was ridiculous to think that, that's what it provides for you. But the price
very much so
for owning a time machine, this gets you where you need to go in a hurry. And looks like there's plenty of room in this thing and everything. So I think I'm going to have to go ahead and pull the trigger and start my aviation career in a Cessna 310.
I like it.
And Derrick, I'm pretty sure that David invited me to land up at the drag strip.
He's gonna clear the drag strip off for you, and you can come in on a steep descent. And I'll be sure to have a video camera on the side.
I'm confident that Bruce will be out there shooting way too many pictures, so I'll buzz him on the way in as well.
I like it.
But another interesting fact is during the NASCAR events, we actually block off the drag strip and we land helicopters on the drag strip as there's some rescue helicopters and, personal helicopters of people being dropped off. So we have a landing zone on the drag strip for helicopters during our big events.
Man.
Money.
Pretty fantastic.
I like it.
It's an interesting place to be. We do some interesting things, and luckily some of it we actually have a full helipad at the track. So, right. You can fly your 310 into Tri-Cities Airport and pick up a helicopter, and the helicopter will have you at the track in 10 minutes.
Oh, nice.
I mean, when it's an event, NASCAR, the NHRA drags, the airport is packed with aircraft. People come in, and the helicopters are just going in and out all day. I mean, it's personal aircraft, GA, big jets, Gulfstreams. It's just a busy place, and they pack the ramp. It's amazing.
Well, guys, as we're talking about the Cessna 310, for me personally, I'm a huge general aviation guy. I think I'm more of the general aviation guy out of all of us, and 310's very special to me. Love King Airs. 310s, though, I can spot one. You see a lot of them around McGee Tyson. What's your closing thoughts on the Cessna 310, David Rowe?
I mean, this is kind of the landmark plane for Cessna. They moved up in a big way when they introduced this one. It was a great aircraft. It provided the basis. They actually made a pressurized version that's the 340. So, I mean, this was a great bones aircraft. They really blew it up into something great. I read that there's an almost bewildering array of choices that exist for the 310 buyer. I mean, there's so many variations, different, features that you can, what do you like? Well, there's probably something out there for you. It's just a beautiful airplane, sleek and fast. It's just a great looking airplane. And obviously now that I'm aware of it, I'm going to notice it every time I see one at the airport.
There's a lot of them around. Dave Gorman, closing thoughts.
We didn't mention, I said something about the U-3 and Air Force service, but this aircraft did serve in the militaries of about 20 different nations as a utility and transport aircraft. So it is a somewhat ubiquitous airplane, and a lot of them still flying. Again, thank you for this choice, this aircraft. I learned a lot about a familiar aircraft, and I can hopefully now tell them apart easily. I know folks are laughing at me, but I'm trying, guys. Okay, I could tell them apart easily from some similar styled twins that look a little bit alike. So take that, and thank you, Cessna, for building such a fantastic aircraft.
Very cool plane. And History of Aviation podcast, social media. You can find all of that down below. Check out all of our social media stuff. And Dave Gorman, we've got the Facebook group.
We do, and we haven't had a ton of information on there lately. We'd love to have a bit more content, and always open to suggestions and feedback about the show. We'd love to hear suggestions for aircraft to feature. What's your favorite aircraft, folks? Let us know, and we'll be glad to consider those for upcoming shows.
Yeah, you just join that group, and it's a whole we're trying to build a big community here and keep this show going. And the other day I was just on Aerophile.
Oh my gosh.
It's I have to make myself take the laptop out of my lap and go away. Tell us about Aerophile, David Rowe.
It's literally a work in progress. I just in the past, since we've had the holidays, I've had some time and started uploading a new batch of photos from my summer vacation. So I've got pictures from the USS Alabama. I've got pictures from the Armaments Museum that was in Florida, and also from the I'm getting ready. I'm working on the pictures from the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola. So it's a work in progress. I'm just constantly adding to it. Some of the pages are complete. These new ones that I'm working on, there'll be placeholder pictures and gobbledygook text, but dig around because there's a lot of aviation history and pictures there for you to see.
Absolutely. And you're on Aerophile is on all the major social media, correct? Plus your website.
Aerophile.com, Aerophile in all the social Facebooks, Instagram, just, type it in and see what pops up.
Just give yourself plenty of time.
You'll need time for that. And Dave Gorman, you just mentioned you were just seen a musical group and was working on a social media post there.
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is Gormania, my last name Gorman, and then IA. So Gormania, you can search that and find me there. Mm-hmm. I finally crossed over the 500 subscriber hurdle, all the way up to 507. It's I'm catching up to Dave. I'm only about 27,000 behind you, but one day, buddy.
I'm watching out for you now. Yeah, you're on the rise.
On your heels, that's for sure. But yeah, I also have an Instagram that I post content, personal, aircraft, and music, things like that. Those are things that I'm interested in. So you can follow me there as well.
Well, guys, as always, I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Good airplane. Thank you.
Fantastic topic, and always great talking with you guys, and looking forward to our next one. Do we know what it's going to be yet? Have we decided? Have we drawn anything out of the hat yet?
We have not, but we will.
Okay. Well, maybe a listener will make a suggestion that we can consider. Okay.
There you go. Let's let that be our next one. We'll see what they say.
All right.
Well,
maybe we can do that, or we could put together a poll of a couple of the choices and let the listeners vote. Something like that.
Absolutely. We'll do it.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. See you guys.
See ya.
And to all of our listeners, we want to give you a special thanks. Thanks for supporting us and listening each and every week. For David Rowe, Dave Gorman, I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks for listening to the History of Aviation podcast.
This is Joe Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.